Have you ever felt like the person closest to you by blood becomes the most distant stranger in your life? I used to think family was the place to come home to, a safe harbor no matter how stormy the world outside got. But on an autumn night at 9 p.m., on a deserted highway 35 miles from Denver, I faced the painful truth. My own father had left me stranded in the rain, like an unwanted spare unworthy of love. My name is Lena Carter, 25 years old. My dad, Richard Carter, was a former soldier. He was used to orders, used to seeing everything as a brutal training exercise. To him, every mistake had to be corrected with humiliation, every bit of resistance stamped out with punishment. He called it a lesson, but to me, it was just scars piling up in my soul. That night, when the car door slammed shut and the engine roared to life, I watched the red taillights of Dad's car fade into the pouring rain. I stood frozen, my canvas shoes soaked and heavy, my hair plastered to my face. He left me with nothing but a shivering body and a broken heart. No phone, no wallet, not even a shred of safety. Just rain stabbing into my skin like needles. I didn't chase after him. I didn't scream or cry. I just stood there, watching the lights blur away like a door slamming shut, sealing off the childhood I'd clung to. In that moment, memories flooded back from when I was a kid. I was always the girl trying to make Dad proud. Every little slip-up, like breaking a glass or getting a bad grade, earned me his words. You gotta learn to be tough. You gotta know how to shut up and take it. Then came the punishment. Sometimes he'd make me run laps in the backyard in the freezing cold, other times stand in the dark corner for hours. I remember one time he took away my dinner to teach me the value of discipline. My mom, Helen, usually just sat there quietly. She rarely stepped in, just silently cleaned up after Dad's rages. Her eyes always held a fear I couldn't fully grasp, but it taught me that silence was the rule in that house. As I grew up, I learned to keep my face blank, so Dad couldn't see the hurt in my eyes. I figured if I was good enough, obedient enough, he'd love me the way I craved. But all I got were harsher lessons. Tonight he said it again, you need to learn a lesson. And he did just that, pulled over on the highway, made me get out, then sped off, leaving me in the pitch-black rain. The cold seeped into my bones. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest like a bird trapped in a steel cage. I tried to breathe, but the air was thick, laced with the wet asphalt smell and the faint metallic tang of the rain. Around me was endless darkness, vast fields shivering in the wind, and the occasional car whizzing by without anyone bothering to stop. I was just a tiny figure vanishing in the storm of nature and my father's cruelty. I wondered, is this what a father's love looks like? A love laced with shame and abandonment? The more I thought, the clearer the invisible chains felt, the ones that had bound me for years. Silence was the law. I'd gotten used to swallowing every pain so Dad wouldn't see my weakness. I'd believed silence was strength. But now, standing on that highway, soaked and shaking, I realized silence was just the shackles he'd locked on me since I was little. Every raindrop hitting my face reminded me I was alone, no one by my side, nowhere left to hide. Dad thought this abandonment would make me grateful when he picked me up and took me home. He figured I'd come crawling back small and compliant, but he had no idea that the moment he drove away was when the last thread tying me to him snapped. Dad's car was long gone from sight. The road stretched on forever, slick like it wanted to swallow me whole. I leaned against a beat-up roadside billboard, an old storage unit sign with a smiling key. The rain peeled the paint, blurring it like a face fresh from crying. I tilted my head back, letting the icy water flood my eyes. In that instant, I swore to myself, I wouldn't be his puppet anymore. I didn't know where I'd go or how I'd survive, but one thing was crystal clear. I couldn't go back to that house, where love meant control and silence was a duty. Maybe as you read this, you're wondering, how could a father treat his own kid like that? I've asked myself that 100 times. But then I realized some people are so obsessed with power that they forget kids aren't soldiers. And the cruelest part wasn't that rainy night. It was the indifference that stretched across all those years. I stood there in the dark, shivering but holding my back straight. I didn't want the last image Dad had of me to be a broken daughter crumbling. He thought this abandonment was my lesson, but he didn't know that tonight, he was the one starting a different one, a lesson in loss. As I write this memory down, I don't want pity. I just want anyone who grew up in a family where love was tangled with control to know you're not alone. If you've ever been dismissed, had your voice shut down, I hope my story reminds you that you deserve to be heard, to be respected. If you've made it this far, maybe you've carried unnamed wounds too. I want you to know you can break free. You can rewrite your own story. Share this if it hits home, drop a comment about where you're living, and most importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe so we can keep going on this journey together. Because what happened after that rainy night, when an unexpected hand reached out to save me, was just the start of the biggest change in my life. There are moments in life when you feel like you've sunk to the absolute bottom, with no hope left. That night, shivering on the highway shoulder as rain poured down like 1,000 tiny knives, I thought it was the end for me, the end of faith, hope, everything. But then, through the thick curtain of rain, a light appeared. Headlights pierced the downpour, cutting across the slick road like a fragile but fierce beam. A black pickup truck eased to the shoulder. I shuddered, not sure if I should feel relief or terror. In the cold dead of night, was I just trading my father's cruelty for another danger? The door swung open. A tall figure stepped out. His long coat was soaked, his sturdy leather boots thudding heavily on the wet ground. As he approached, I recognized the familiar face, angular, calm, eyes bright but without judgment. "Miss Carter," a deep, steady voice cut through the rain. "You ready? Let's go." I froze. It was Elias Brooks, the private bodyguard the company had assigned to me lately. He was 10 years older than me, ex-military before switching to protection work. I'd always seen his presence as just procedure, an extra layer against the pressures from family and work. But in that second, Elias wasn't just a bodyguard. He was the lifeline pulling me from the abyss. I climbed into the truck, water dripping from my clothes onto the floor. When the door shut, the outside noise cut off. Inside, the heater's warmth wrapped around me like the embrace I'd craved for so long but never had. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just breathed, shaky breaths, letting my heart settle after the shock. Elias slid into the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel tight. He didn't look at me right away, didn't bombard me with questions. The silence in the truck wasn't punishment like Dad's. It was a strange understanding. This silence gave me space to just be, to feel safe. It was a while before Elias spoke. "He really left you out here, huh?" I nodded faintly. My voice came out hoarse from holding back. "He called it a lesson." Elias's knuckles whitened on the wheel, but he didn't comment. I saw the veins bulge on his hands, the sign of anger he was holding back for me. But he didn't lash out or curse Dad. He got it. I didn't need someone fighting my battles. I needed to be believed in my own experience. We drove in silence for a long stretch. Outside, the rain hammered on, but inside, I started hearing my heartbeat clearly. It was racing, chaotic, like my body still couldn't believe I'd escaped that darkness. Then Elias asked a question that stopped me cold. "You want to go home?" Home. Such a short word, but it hit like a ton of bricks. In my head, the suburban Denver house flashed up, red-tiled roof, brick walls, living room full of rigid rules. I remembered the family dinner table, where Dad's voice drowned out everything else, where Mom just stayed quiet, and where I learned to fade into the shadows to avoid collision. Was that home, or just a mental prison built on the name of family? I turned to the window, watching raindrops race down like cracks. I heard my own voice, small but surer than ever. No. Just one word, but it made my whole body shake. It was the first time in my life I'd dared to say no. No to the demands. No to going back to the place that had crushed me for years. That single no was the key unlocking the invisible chains Dad had wrapped around me since childhood. Elias glanced over, his eyes holding no pity, just respect. He nodded slightly like he'd been waiting for it. He hit the gas and the truck sped off, leaving the dark road and the past I'd just rejected behind. I didn't know where we were headed. I didn't know what tomorrow looked like. But right then, I knew I'd turned to a new chapter. Maybe you're wondering, how can a daughter walk away from her family? I've asked myself that 100 times too. But that night in the rain, I got it clearer than ever. Family isn't always safe. Sometimes, family is what you have to leave to find yourself. To me, Elias wasn't just a rescuer. He was proof that there are still good people out there, people who get that silence doesn't have to mean punishment, it can mean respect. He didn't push, didn't rush, didn't turn my pain into a moral lecture. He just showed up, and sometimes showing up is stronger than 1,000 words. As I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, I saw Dad's last image, cold eyes, smug face as he drove away. I swore to myself, if he thought I'd come back small and grateful, he was dead wrong. From the second I said no, the lesson he meant to teach me dissolved. Instead, a new one started, one I was writing myself. And I knew this journey would be long, wounds don't heal overnight, but at least I'd taken the first step. If you've come this far with me, I want to ask, did this story touch your heart? If you found it gripping, comment why so I know I'm not alone. If you think it needs more drama, be real and comment N. Whatever your answer, I know one thing for sure. What's coming next as I start rewriting my life will be way more intense. They say when one door closes, another opens, but they rarely mention the vast emptiness between those doors, the place where you've lost everything and haven't found anything yet. I'm living in that emptiness right now. After that fateful rainy night, I moved into a tiny apartment in downtown Denver. It's on the third floor of an old building, with peeling walls and an elevator that groans every time it moves. The living room window overlooks a noisy alley with Mexican spots open all night. To anyone else, it's a dump. But to me, it's a palace. Because for the first time, I have a place that's truly mine. No yelling, no cold stares following me, no lessons hanging over my head. Just me, four walls, and the silence I choose. But freedom's never a straight road. It's full of stumbles and fears. Just days later, my phone started blowing up non-stop. I saw Dad's name on the screen. My heart clenched, hands shaking, but I didn't pick up. He left voicemails. The first was his usual commanding tone. "Lena, get home now. Stop this childish nonsense. You need to learn responsibility." I deleted it without listening to the end. The second came the next day, his voice softer, laced with fake pleading. "Baby, I know I went too far, but it was all to make you strong. Come home, we'll start over." I let out a bitter laugh. In 25 years, he'd never admitted he was wrong. Now that I'd left, he was trying to reel me back with that phony gentleness. The third hit that evening, pure threat. "If you keep embarrassing me, I won't forgive you. I'll make sure everyone sees what an ungrateful, disobedient daughter you are. You'll regret this." I powered off the phone. Fear flickered in, but it was quickly replaced by this weird strength. I saw it. Everything he said revolved around him, his image, his need to control. He'd never once thought about my feelings. The next few days, I started rewriting my story. No more letting Dad narrate it for me. I called my aunt in California, the one who'd avoided our house for years because of the heavy vibe. I told her the truth. The night Dad left me on the highway, the rain, the terror, and my choice not to go back. There was a long silence on her end. Then, "Oh God, Lena, I knew my brother was tough, but I never thought he'd go that far." I called an old college friend who'd seen me awkward around Dad a bunch of times. After hearing it, she just sighed. "Now I get why you always seemed like you were wearing a mask." I even told coworkers at the office, the ones who'd admired Richard as the ultimate strict but fair dad. When the truth came out, I saw their looks change. No more blind hero worship, just shock and sympathy. Word spread faster than I expected. In a town like Denver, where social circles are tangled tight, one whisper turns into a wave, and this time that wave was crashing straight at Dad. Elias was the only one I let into the little apartment. He'd drop by evenings with hot takeout from a nearby spot. We'd sit by the window, watching leftover rain streak the glass. He didn't talk much, but every word landed like truth. One time, when I mentioned Dad's constant calls, Elias looked me dead in the eye. "He used silence to cage you your whole childhood. Now it's time you turn silence into your weapon." I frowned. What do you mean? Don't respond. Don't justify. Don't explain. Let the truth speak through others. You? Stay silent. That silence will drive him crazy. He'll lose control. I mulled it over for ages. My whole life, I'd seen silence as Dad's imposition. Now, for the first time, I saw it could be freedom, not the bowed head kind, but the straight-backed, proud kind. Then the day I'd been waiting for came. A friend sent me a photo from the club Dad frequented. In it, Richard Carter sat alone, no one around him. The guys who'd saluted him, seen him as the discipline icon, now dodged him, avoided chit-chat. A few shot him suspicious, even contemptuous looks. Seeing that pic, I shook with a mix of tremors and relief. Tremors because I'd never imagined Dad losing his shine. Relief because he wasn't untouchable anymore. In that moment, it hit me. His power never came from real love or respect. It came from fear. And when the fear was gone, the perfect father image crumbled with it. I sat alone in the apartment, yellow lamplight spilling over the patchy walls. I thought of all his lessons, running in the cold wind, going hungry, enduring in silence. A bitter smile crossed my face. Those didn't make me strong. They just turned me into a shadow. But tonight, I was rewriting my lessons. The lesson that I could live without him. The lesson that truth packs more punch than any lie. The lesson that silence, used right, can be the loudest voice. The last person I expected at the door of that tiny apartment was her. That night, Denver was colder than usual. I'd gotten home late from work, grocery bag in hand, still smelling like coffee. As I hit the third-floor hallway, I froze. A figure huddled by the door, thin coat damp with mist, shoulders trembling in the breeze. My heart flipped when I recognized the face. My mom. Helen Carter. I'd imagined 100 scenarios, from Dad's accusations to the relatives' cold shoulders, but I'd never pictured Mom showing up. In my memories, she always stood behind him, eyes heavy, lips pressed tight, never once speaking up for me. She looked up at my footsteps. Her eyes were shadowed, redrimmed like she'd been crying for hours. "Sweetie," her voice shook, "can I come in?" I fumbled the key, dazed. The door swung open to my cramped space, just a bed, a table, and some beat-up furniture. She stepped in, sank into the wooden chair by the table, her hands clasped tight like she was praying. "Lena," she started, "I know you're mad at me. You have every right. My whole life I've been silent, and that silence let you suffer." Those words choked me up. How many years had I waited for this? An admission, proof I wasn't crazy for feeling abandoned. I studied her face, gaunt, weary, wrinkles deeper around her eyes than her age. "That night your dad left you in the rain," she went on, voice cracking. "He came home and bragged about teaching you a lesson. I just sat there, didn't say a word. Do you know how ashamed that made me feel? I didn't stop him, didn't stand up. I just let it happen. And it's killing me bit by bit." I bit my lip hard. Part of me wanted to yell in her face, "Why didn't you do something? Why'd you leave me alone?" But another part trembled because for the first time she owned her mistake. If you want to hear more stories and knots like this that I'm facing, and if you relate, check out my previous videos on this channel. Memories rushed in. I remembered the punishments outside in winter, hands numb with cold. I'd look through the window where Mom stood, but her eyes would just slide away quietly. I remembered dinners with Dad yelling, me glancing at Mom for a nod of comfort, but getting only suffocating silence. "I hate you." It burst out, my voice thick. "I hate you for seeing it all and staying quiet." Tears streamed down Mom's cheeks. She nodded. "I know. I deserve that hate. But sweetie, I was a victim too. All these years I was chained by fear, by your dad's power. I was weak. I didn't have the courage to protect my own child." I went quiet. Two thoughts clashed in my head. One side raw wounds full of rage, the other a longing for a real mom. I felt like that 6-year-old in the cold yard, wanting to hug her tight and run away all at once. The little apartment fell silent, just the wall clock ticking steady. Mom bowed her head, her shaky hand grabbing mine. "I'm sorry, honey. I know this apology's way too late, but I have to say it, or I'll take it to my grave. I looked at her hand, thin, calloused. Fingers that had cleaned up after Dad's outbursts. Fingers that cooked cold meals in silence. And now they clung to me, trembling, begging for a chance. A hot tear hit the back of my hand. My heart wobbled. I remembered Elias's words. Sometimes forgiveness isn't because they deserve it. It's because we need to be free. And in that instant, I got it. Holding on to hate just kept Dad's chains on me. Mercy was the key to freedom. I squeezed her hand lightly, voice choked but firm. I used to wish you'd just say one thing, that I wasn't wrong for wanting my own life. You said it today. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry the hate anymore. Mom broke down, pulling me into a hug. It was shaky, clumsy, but for the first time, it felt truly like Mom's. I let the tears soak into her shoulder, let my heart unburden itself. They say you can't go back to the old house and keep the same heart you had when you left. I'd been gone a month, but standing at the weathered wooden gate in suburban Denver, my heart still hammered like it was caged in iron. That house used to be family, but it was also the prison that devoured my childhood. I gripped the old key tight in my palm, small thing, but heavy as a boulder. Today, I wasn't coming back to beg entry. I was returning it. The door opened. Richard, my dad, stood there. He looked wrecked. It took me seconds to recognize him. Hair messy, eyes sunken, posture stripped of the ex-soldier swagger he'd always worn. Around him hung the heavy air of isolation. "Lena," he rasped, "you're home." He said it like a win, like my return would restore his lost power. I scanned the living room, once echoing with shouts, where Mom quietly tidied after every lesson. Now it was thick with dust. Family photos hung crooked on the walls, faces in the frames looking like strangers. "I'm not home," I said softly. "I'm here to end it." His eyes narrowed. Then he tried his old tone. "Honey, I know I was a bit strict, but it was all to make you strong. Look at your mom. She's been weak her whole life, so she depends on everyone. I didn't want that for you." I almost laughed, but it would have been too bitter. I just shook my head. "You didn't want me strong, you wanted me silent." Helen appeared from the kitchen. I hadn't even noticed she was there. She stood still, hands twisting her apron, eyes watery but steady. "Richard," Mom said, voice firm for the first time. No tremble. "Stop twisting the truth. You left our girl in the rain. You turned both of us into prisoners of silence. Enough." Dad whipped around, eyes blazing at her. "Helen, shut your mouth. This isn't your business." "No," Mom shot back resolute. "This is my business. I've been silent too long." I'd never seen her stand so solid. In that moment, I knew. She'd stepped out of the shadows for real. Dad moved toward me, voice dropping to a plea. "Lena, listen to me. I've lost everything." Colleagues turned their backs. Neighbors look at me with disgust. "You're the only one who can fix my reputation. Come home. We'll start fresh." Reputation? I clutched the key harder. "You cared more about that than me. I'm not a tool to polish your image. I'm a person." He trembled, hands reaching like he wanted to grab me. But I stepped back. I met his eyes, the ones that used to terrify me. Now they were just empty. I opened my palm, set the key on the wooden table. The metallic clink echoed through the room like a final verdict. "Silence didn't break me, it broke you. I'm not your lesson, you're mine." The room went dead quiet. Dad stood frozen, lips moving but no words coming. The man who'd believed silence would crush me was now crushed by mine. Mom stepped up, hand on my shoulder, her eyes full of pride mixed with pain. I knew she was shaking, but this time she chose to stand with me, no more turning away. I turned and walked out the door. Autumn wind rushed in, cold, but my heart felt light, like I'd dropped a 1,000-pound weight. Behind me, Dad stayed rooted, like the jailer left in the prison he'd built. Before I left, I glanced back at Mom. She nodded faintly, a warm, agreeing nod, like she was saying, "Go, you've done it." On the drive back, my heart still raced, but not from fear. It was the beat of freedom, of a win that didn't need shouts or violence, just truth. I knew this wasn't the end. I'd dropped the key, but there was another to unlock, forgiveness to free myself. And that journey would be the final chapter of this story. They say a year can change a lifetime. For me, the last 12 months felt like a rebirth. Sometimes I'd still sit for hours by the apartment window in downtown Denver, watching taillights streak the street below, remembering that fateful rainy night. But instead of shaking, I felt calm. I'd survived. More than that, I'd started living on my own terms. My new place is small but bright, flooded with morning sun and the scent of jasmine from the pot I planted on the balcony myself. I've got a steady job at an interior design firm where my ideas get heard instead of shut down by a contemptuous glare. For the first time, my worth isn't measured by silence. My neighbor, a girl named Mariah, knocked one late night, face bruised from her hot-tempered husband. I saw my old self in her eyes, scared, stuck, doubting she deserved rescue. I let her crash, made breakfast the next morning, and hooked her up with a women's abuse support group. Mariah teared up thanking me, and I smiled. We all deserve freedom. Turns out, helping others heals you too. Mom, Helen, visits often now. She brings a basket of apples or some fresh-baked goods, stuff she never got to make just for me back in the old house. I see her changing day by day, less fear, less head-bowing, more smiles. She started an art class, even sends me her clumsy but colorful landscape sketches. Watching her, I realize it's never too late to step out of the shadows. Dad, Richard, still lives in the old house, but he's not the man who made everyone bow anymore. He's lost his colleagues' respect, the glow of his model-soldier image. I hear he's quieter now, sits for hours in the living room, staring at that key I left behind. I don't seek revenge or wish him misery. I leave him to the silence he created. Thanksgiving rolled around, family reunion time. I'd planned to skip it, but Mom begged, "Honey, sometimes facing it one last time is the real release." I went not for Dad, but for me. The old house loomed up. I crossed the threshold that used to barricade my childhood, now just a cold wooden frame. Kitchen smells wafted, stirring memories both familiar and distant. The relatives were all there. They stared when I walked in, then fell quiet, watching. Dad sat at the head of the table, clinging to old habits, but his back was hunched, eyes flat without fire. He stared at me forever, like searching for an anchor. I sat across from him, steady, unafraid. Dinner dragged in thick silence. Mom tried small talk now and then, but tension hung heavy. I felt every eye on me, waiting for the explosion. Finally, Dad set down his knife and fork, voice gravelly. "Lena, you've cost me everything, but can you forgive me?" I looked at him. The man who'd taught me silence was strength, that love meant iron discipline, was now just a weary shadow. Inside me, waves crashed, anger, pity, exhaustion, and a longing to close it all. I took a deep breath, then spoke calm and clear. "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I want to be free." The room plunged into silence. Dad bowed his head, hands shaking, no comeback, no threats. For the first time, he faced the truth without denial. In that instant, a massive weight lifted off my shoulders. All those years I'd carried the anger, waiting for his admission, his apology. But forgiveness isn't validation for the one who hurt you. It's the gift you give yourself to let go. Mom looked at me, eyes misty but shining with pride. I knew she'd been freed too, no more living in silence. As I left the table, I stepped out to the porch, breathing in the crisp Denver night air. Scattered stars dotted the sky, enough to light the path ahead. I got it. My journey didn't end with forgiving Dad. It was just beginning, the road to a free, strong, compassionate life. And I know there are more stories, more people needing a hand out of the dark. Maybe a neighbor, a coworker, or even you listening right now. If you've ever been in the shadows, remember, you're not alone. Because forgiveness wasn't a gift I gave Dad, it was the wings I gave myself. Looking back on my path, I see pain isn't the end. It can be the spark for growth. I was abandoned by Dad in the rain, lived in silence like chains, craved protection from Mom. But in the end, I learned real strength isn't revenge or hate. It's mercy and the courage to walk your own road. I forgave, not because the hurter deserved it, but because I wanted freedom. Free from the past, from lingering scars, and ready to offer hope to others. This story isn't just mine, it could be anyone's who's been dismissed, abandoned, or silenced. And if you're hearing me, remember, you deserve love and respect too. If this touched your heart, drop a comment, share your thoughts, and hit subscribe to join me on the next journeys. Who knows, maybe the next story is the piece you need.